and then I would just crumple it all up, right? It would drive like my sister mad. She would be like, I couldn't believe that you'd spend so much time. You make one wrong move and then it's like toast. But to me, it was like, no, it didn't match the level of perfection that I wanted.
We've been called a lot of things, and we're inspired by everything around us, including each other. The individuals that have inspired me the most create beauty and positive change. To me, that's the highest form of art, and it deserves the loudest praise. This is Shout Out, the art of self-expression. On this episode of Shout Out, the multi-talented painter, collage, and ceramic artist, Jacoby Jorgensen.
Creativity and just the creative process have always been a part of anything that I kind of do. So I've always kind of marched to my own drum. National Geographic gave me appreciation for different things around the globe, right? That, all of a sudden you'd see like some tribe out in the middle of somewhere else and they had all these crazy art pieces. Another thing that I really like is like the collage work. I would cut out the images. So I have like boxes of images ready to go. Tell yourself not everything's going to be a masterpiece, right? And to get to that masterpiece level, you've got to develop that skill. You got to show up, you got to do the practice. Sometimes you just got to roll with it.
Welcome to the show, Jacoby Jorgensen. How are you, sir?
Yeah, I'm doing well. What about yourself?
I'm doing good. Thanks for asking. I've known you for years now, and I've known you to make music. And, within the past couple of years, I've seen these amazing sculptures that you're getting into, and you're a painter. And I think we had a photography class in high school. So How many disciplines do you have?
How much time do we have here? Creativity and just the creative process have always been a part of, anything that I kind of do. And so I've always kind of, marched to my own drum. Anything from music, woodworking, leatherwork, collage, the full gamut, right? Anything I can get my hands on, even chain metal, just anything that kind of develops a skill, right? That kind of just, I feel that like as humans, right, we really are creative, right? We start off really creative when we're kids and stuff like that. We draw, and as we kind of get more conditioned and stuff like that, we kind of lose some of that, right? We lose some of that spark, some of that creativity. And for me, like, I've just always leaned into it and always just tried to, develop more or see, like, hey, what makes this interesting, and how can I, improve upon it, or how can I, learn something from it? So,
what kind of inspirations do you have? What influences do you?
Well, it's really funny because it could be anything, right? It could be the most simplest little mundane thing, or it could be something very profound. But I'm always kind of looking, right? I'm always kind of have my like antennas out there trying to draw in creativity. I noticed from like early on, I was thinking about it that the school that we went to, and when I say we, I think about like my siblings, because they were the closest people to me growing up. And that was because the school that I went to was away or a little bit further from like the local school. So we drove out and we were kind of isolated and stuff like that. So, rather than growing up with cable TV, we had like, just like the, 5 basic like channels, to choose from. And I think that kind of limiting that scope a little bit, like, I saw a lot of, public broadcasting, and I like was kind of limited to that. But I had like subscriptions to like Highlights magazines, National Geographic. We would get like old people magazines from family members and stuff like that. So I think just kind of being limited in that regard gave me appreciation for just different things, right? National Geographic gave me appreciation for different things around like the globe, right? That, all of a sudden you'd see like some tribe out in the middle of, somewhere else, and they had all these crazy art pieces, or like, they're like had all this, ceremonial, garb and stuff. And I would be like, wow, that's really cool. And I wouldn't really try to figure out what made it cool. I just was like, oh, that's cool. I like that. Or, like, hey, I watched a bunch of like reruns of like Gilligan's Island. So like, like I like a lot of that, stuff, or like a lot of mid-century modern stuff, like, so I would just kind of whatever, because the scope was so limited, I would just kind of, drawing from that and just like pick apart the pieces that I liked and then just kind of put them all together. So
that's so cool. And it's something that I was thinking about today, because I have an original Jacoby, and the thing that I really enjoy about it is it has like each one of your pieces has almost like an Easter Island like mysteriousness about it. And I like just having it on my desk where I'm like, I look at it every once in a while, and it's like it adds to kind of the flavor, and like it's just a little piece that my eye draws to every once in a while as I'm being creative. And I don't know, it's a very cool and unique style that is, it's just your signature, man. I really dig it. How long have you been doing the sculpture?
So like the sculpture and ceramics, it's fairly new. I mean, in high school art, like, I did a couple little pieces of clay and stuff like that. But it wasn't until maybe about 5 or 6 years ago, I started taking classes, college classes, and community college classes. But I took a ceramics class, and the thing that I really just kind of fell in love with, and in the ceramic community, they say, you get bit by the ceramic bug. And so the thing that really drew me to it was that there would be pieces that, with clay, you have to, allow for different variables that are out of your control, right? It's just one of them. Like, you have to have the clay at a certain like dryness for it to stick together. If you're going to stick something together, you have to make sure that, like, you have as much like contact as possible. So there's all these different variables, right? And I found myself, the stuff that I would spend hours on, right? And I would be like, this is going to be a masterpiece. Turned out like garbage, or would crack, or like, and then something that I just haphazardly was like, oh, hey, this is the last firing of the semester, I better just throw it in and just like, see what comes out. Those pieces would come out amazing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So kind of going back to my childhood, right? I love, like, with the limited scope of like, public broadcasting and stuff like that. There's a show called Mark Kessler's Draw Squad.
Yep.
I would sit there, I'd spend, they talked about like the basics, like, shading and just like, three-dimensional.
Pause 1 second. Hold on.
Oh my gosh. I have that. Like books, right? It's probably right next to the stuffy book. Okay.
Yep, it is on this. Oh, it's awesome.
Yeah, so I would spend hours just drawing robots, or like, I love that at like end of each show, he would just like keep drawing off of one like huge, landscape, right?
Yeah.
I would try to like emulate that, right? But I would get to a certain point where I would make a mistake, and I would say, that's not good enough. And then I would just crumple it all up, right? It would drive like my sister mad. She would be like, I couldn't believe that you'd spend so much time. You make one wrong move and then it's like toast. But to me, it was like, no, it didn't match the level of perfection that I wanted. And so I wanted nothing to do with it. I didn't want to erase it. Like, it just wasn't up to the level that I wanted. And so now fast forward into the ceramic realm, right? I would get so mad because it was like all the stuff I'd spent all that time on just didn't come out. And so, but then the stuff like that I just haphazard put together came out beautiful.
Yeah.
It was like this, like, it was freeing because I could finally kind of give up that, like, my art has to fit in the context of what my mind makes it, right?
Mm-hmm.
But what really drew me into ceramics was that there's like this element, right? With painting, you don't like it, you can paint over it, or like you manipulate it, make the colors how you want. Clay, you have a general idea. Yeah, red might turn out red, but you don't know if it's going to be all like, one type of, like, one hue of red, or because it was in the kiln a certain way that like it got flashed. And so then like you have darker red on one side. And so with ceramics, it was like, it was so freeing because you really didn't know until the piece was finally finished, what you had. So it's like the only form of gambling I'm comfortable with.
Yeah, there's a certain amount of control you just have to relinquish as you get into it.
Yeah. And so it's like, something that I've learned along the way is that, like, how do you get good at making one cup? Well, you have to make, 1,000, well, not 1,000, but you have to make, a lot of cups to be able to make one cup, a good, decent cup.
Yeah.
And I'll let you know if I ever get to that level.
Oh, I think you're already there, man. Like I see the, the designs and things that are coming out, and I'm blown away each time. It's really cool stuff. And the Vans cup that you just posted.
Oh yeah. Hey, in fact, I have it here.
Oh my gosh. It's funny because it's like I'm wearing, I was wearing Vans when I saw that, and I'm like, I gotta have it. It's so cool.
Yeah, in fact, I'm going to pour out my drink right now because I wanted to show you one little element that I didn't post on there.
Oh yeah.
So this is like the level of detail that I like.
Oh my gosh, you did the actual grip on the bottom.
Actual grip. I pressed it against one of my Vans shoes, but
That
then
is so cool.
Gum and added my signature to it.
That is so freaking cool. And I'm going to say it again because I already mentioned it to you. I love your signature. And when are you getting that on shirts? Because I want to freaking rock the Jacoby shirt, man.
Hey, you know what? Like I said, I have yet to establish the accounts. I thank you for the referral there.
Yeah.
I like to do the screen printing myself, but I know that I should probably let go of some of the process. But I've got one of those paper cutters, and so I've been actually incorporating some of them into my actual clay. So I'll press in the signature, and so then it'll leave the little like relief of it. So
yeah. And you did that on this one, right? Or what was the process for doing that?
Exactly. Yeah. So a lot of the stuff that I do, I like to kind of antique it. In the like ceramic community, they call it wiping. So like I'll paint the colors, and so with ceramics you usually do 2 firings. You do the first firing, which is like the bisque firing, and that cooks out most of the water, right? But fully vitrified and have every water molecule, like, for it to transcend into the stoneware category here, it goes through the glaze firing. And what I usually do is I'll use underglazes, and I'll paint that while it's still wet, and then I'll have it bisque, and then I'll do like the black, I'll paint black over it, and then I wipe it away. And so it kind of leaves this antique, kind of heavier contrast.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah, so that's one of my signature kind of like looks that I like to do. And that's where you get some of the like old antiquity kind of like feel to it.
How many different layers can you do like on a piece?
So I mean, the sky's the limit, right? So you could possibly refire it. Now, every time that you refire it, you run the risk of something shrinking or cracking or stuff cooling at different rates. But there's all sorts of you can you can do like some what they call overglazes and stuff, where you get into some lusters and stuff like that, where you get decals, and so you can get like really like photo realistic images. Or so like cool. With the lusters, you can do like gold and different things like that. So it all depends. Like a lot of the different things fire at different what they call cone levels, and it's different temperatures. What I like is I do what is known as like a high fire, and that's like at the place I get it fired at. It's between what they call a cone 5 and a cone 6, and it's kind of like it's stoneware, so it's got kind of a higher ting to it.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, if you have like ceramics and you go and you kind of ting it, if it has a higher ting to it, it's stronger. If it kind of has more of a thud, then it's more fragile. So
do you have any plans to to get a kiln yourself at home?
I've thought about that, and I actually kind of like going into like the clay store and having like the clay community, because it's also kind of like a way to kind of bounce off, like like
Yeah.
drop off pieces. Like they'll be like, oh hey, this is really cool. Like I made a chain that had a padlock on it, right?
Uh-huh.
And they're like, oh, we were so stoked when this came out of the kiln. We put it on and like parading around and stuff. So and then also so I'm a family man. I've got 4 daughters. And so I've seen a couple like house fires that just scare me with some
Yeah.
of the people in the clay community. So
Yeah.
yeah, so it's like like hobby versus, like passion.
Yeah. No, it's a good point. And it's like, and I think a lot of artists, they reach a point in their, their career or on their path where they realize I'm spending a tremendous amount of time alone.
Yeah.
And I need reasons to go out and talk with other creative people. I mean, that's the whole reason why I started doing this, because I'm like, I enjoy being alone, but when you do it over and over and over again, it can get to you. So yeah, I think that's a really healthy habit of yours.
Yeah. So I enjoy that, right? I enjoy just being in the community as much as I can. I kind of miss like I ran out of ceramic classes to take. Like, college, I did a class just so I could do it. But yeah, I really like, the clay community, we're kind of like, I don't want to say the middle child of fine art, but like, we're kind of
Oh,
like
don't do that.
the misfits a little bit. But another reason I love clay so much is that, going to a bunch of different like art museums and stuff like that, you see the artifacts, right, from like thousands of years ago,
Yeah.
right? So it's like, with paint lasts for so long, canvas lasts for so long, even wood lasts for so long, but like, who knows, like they might excavate this Vans cup, like, thousands of years from now. Like,
I hope so.
yeah, and be like, who's this Jacoby guy?
This is Jacoby. His stuff is everywhere.
Yeah, exactly.
That's super cool. Any horror stories? Any like heartbreaking, like this was going to be the piece and then it just
Oh yeah.
apart?
I mean that that happens all the time, right? So you know like even just this morning, right? And I really feel bad. So I love my wife ahead of time, so I want to give that closure
It
ahead.
was good.
I had like a piece that was like on the counter this morning, and like I had checked on it, because like you only have so much time before it dries out.
Mhm.
I usually like a discipline I have, and this was even when I was in music, like I would try to do like when I was into like making my own beats and stuff, I'd be like, I got to do a beat a day. That way you just keep that practice going. It doesn't have to be good, it just
Right.
have to be there. So I try to like average like a piece a week, right? And so like I'll have usually something up on the counter, right? And so this piece was up on the counter, and like my wife had moved it, right? And I was like, oh, where'd you move it to? And it was like in a cabinet, and like it was touching something else. And I was like, oh no, like I spent 3 hours on that. And now like, now it has the possibility of being ruined, right? And so I feel bad for that, and I'm learning to try to like tame my rage a little bit when it comes to that.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I mean that's an example. Or I mean like sometimes if a small little bubble gets in like in between the pieces of clay, right? It can pop the whole thing and kind of like explode. Or one of the maybe negative drawbacks of having my pieces fired in the community kilns is I got a random drip of somebody else's glaze.
Right.
Or if somebody like has something that explodes, then guess what? Like that piece is now fused onto your piece, So
Right.
yeah. Or I recently made another mug, and okay, so I'm a little bit of a Disney nerd, and I recently watched the Muppets Haunted Mansion.
Oh,
And
yeah.
yeah, have you seen it?
I haven't seen it. I saw it like on Disney Plus, and I'm like, oh, I've got to get around to that.
Yeah, yeah. So there was like a split second where they show like the Swedish chef, and he's like showing a cup, right? And it's like a tiki mug cup, and I was like, oh, I need to make that, right?
Yeah.
And I made it, right? And like it turned out amazing. But there's a small little chip on the bottom, and it was like, somebody handling it, putting it in the kiln, and it just is like, oh no, like I spent hours on that, man. That was my masterpiece.
Yeah. It reminds me, I had an instructor. I took ceramics at Wood Creek, and there was an instructor who she was like a real stickler, like write down your glazes, write down your whole process, because she, I think, secretly wanted to figure out like the best glazes and use, an army of us to like weed, and vet that out. And similar to you, when you're talking about, having kind of a happy accident, you're trying, those don't really work, and then one pops up and you're like, oh, this is amazing. I did, and I didn't write it down, and she was furious with me. But you're right, like it seemed like the harder I tried, the more things would fall apart. And then it was like, even on this bowl I had like created, I still actually have it, but it's like the actual sculpt of it is not really good. I had done much better pieces that exploded on me, or like had like little chips or whatever and drips. And then this one, the glaze came out beautiful. That's like staring into like the bottom of like a crystal clear lake or something, but I didn't write down the glaze, so she wasn't very happy with me. But
yeah. There's an element of alchemy when it comes to it, right? Like,
yeah.
And you want to take credit, but you really can't. But to other people, they don't know any difference. Like,
Yeah. What kind of advice would you give to someone that's like trying to get either into ceramics or just being creative in general? Because you've done so many things, and like I like that note that you had mentioned about showing up every day and just like setting a goal and like showing up, even if like, all right, today I'm probably not feeling it's not going to happen. What other kind of advice or nuggets could you give them?
Yeah. So I mean, with that, everybody's influenced by different things, right? And I think that we as artists have a tendency to be like, we want to be so unique that it has to be completely original, and that we can't be influenced by anyone or anything like that. And to me, that's kind of like some art school garbage, right? Because it's like, okay, well, most anything that you see, if you studied enough, that it's somewhere else, right? So the thing is as long as you're doing things that you like, right, and not necessarily like, there's times that I find myself, right, I'm like, oh well, maybe I should go with like popularity, or like, if you set out to write a song, right, and you're writing out a song based off of something that's on the radio right now, well, that's great, but that's going to sound dated by the time you record it, by the time you release that stuff. So I mean, it's good to have influence, but it's also good to be unique. So you have to find like a balancing act of being influenced, but doing your own like unique twist off of that,
Right.
and not being afraid to make mistakes, and not set out to be like everything has to be a masterpiece. Sometimes you just have to show up. Sometimes the creativity is not going to be there, right? Sometimes I'm working on a piece and I'm like, okay, I have it in my mind, it's got to work out this way, and then it completely flops, and it's like, okay, no. So then I'm like, okay, and this is where I guess another nugget would be is sometimes you just got to roll with it, right? If you just like, like you go to crumple it halfway, and then all of a sudden you're like, wait a second, here, I see something else now, right? So
Yes.
yeah. So I mean, like, just like tell yourself not everything's going to be a masterpiece, right? And to get to that masterpiece level, right, you've got to develop that skill. You got to show up, you got to do the practice, and another thing that I really like is like the collage work, right? Talking about like, National Geographic and stuff. I would cut out the images, right? And so I have like even just, boxes of images cut out, ready to go. And I just like to, put them in different places to, like have them, interact and be like, okay, this is a secret line, right? Like this is the secret composition. And so, one of my professors once said that, like, in a gallery, people are going to look at your work and it's going to be about 3 seconds long. You have their attention for about 3 seconds and they walk on, right? But for me, what I like to do is I like to be like, okay, yeah, here's the 3 seconds, right? This is like, okay, yeah, your eye's going to enter in here. It's going to, swirl around here or whatever. But then I also like to do like the Easter egg approach, right? Where you throw in these little like gems where it's like, the average viewer that's just going to spend that 3 seconds, yeah, look at it, that's cool, move on. But to the person that spends like a little extra time on it and like, spends 5 minutes on it, they're like, wait a second here. There's that, like, oh, I see what okay, their thought process was this. Oh, okay, and so it like unlocks that level, right?
I love it.
So that's like something that I like to do is kind of like, hide little Easter eggs for like the viewer that's going to spend that time. And so I encourage anybody out there that's like being creative to think on those multi-levels, right? You want to appeal to like a broad crowd, but then you also want to kind of hone in some little specific things that only people in that craft would know, or only people that, spend the time, right? Like they spend the time absorbing it. And so like you should have, something of substance to give them.
I love that. I love that general to specific, like whittling it down. And I don't know if you remember him or ever knew him, but a friend of mine, Joey Brown,
Yeah.
that we went to school with.
Yes.
He was like the master of like giving me that note whenever he'd see me like working on something. He's like, hide something like small somewhere. And I was like, that's such a great idea.
It really is.
In the pieces that like I would do that, like other people would end up talking about or whatever, they were like, oh, did you know that this was, in there? And I'm like, that was such a good note. It's those little things that make, all that hard work special.
Yeah.
Is there anybody that you'd like to throw a shout out to?
You know what? I'd like to throw a shout out. He probably doesn't need it, but I had my clay professor at Sierra College in Rockland, California. His name's Ray Gonzalez, and he was really like he teaches on every level, right? He's still teaching like in Lincoln. He's still teaching at Sierra College. In the city of Lincoln, they have the Gladdy McBean like factory, and it's still a factory today where they make big clay sewer pipes, but then they also make all these like intricate like building facades, right? And like they have these huge kilns and stuff. I took in high school, I spent 1 year at Roseville High, and I took a tour there, and we got to go into these big, huge kilns and walk in there and stuff, and it was just really cool. Well, every year they would throw like this event. It was called the Feats of Clay, and I remember there was like this pot that had like it was just like a tall kind of cylindrical pot, but it had feet sticking out of it, and I thought, oh, that's kind of funny, feats of clay, and stuff. But little did I know that, like, years later, when I'm taking a class at Sierra College, that I would be talking to the guy that actually made that sculpture and what threw that on. But he's still teaching. He's still active in the ceramics community. He's just one of those like rock stars of a guy, just super influential, great storyteller, right? We as individuals, I've heard it a couple times on previous shows. We're narrative-seeking individuals, right? And so he's just a great storyteller, great with people. And he's actually, so like in the clay community, there's a group, it's like NCICA. I forget what the acronym stands for, sorry. But every year they throw like a big convention. It's like 4 days long. and they have people from all over the country come over, and here's like new people that are on the scene, older people, and it's all the clay community. Well, he has so much pull that he actually is having it in Sacramento. And so the NCCA 4-day conference is going to be there. So I'm super excited to go.
That's awesome.
I'm excited that I was able to learn under him, and just thankful for all the opportunities he's given me and all the inspiration. So
that's awesome, man. I'm gonna have to look up his work.
Yeah, big shout out to Ray Gonzalez. For just all the life lessons. So
very cool. Well, thanks so much for spending the time to kind of share your process and your inspirations, man. Really appreciate it.
Hey, definitely. Thank you for giving me the opportunity and the platform to share it. I think it's great that what you're doing here, and that you're kind of highlighting others and just building them up and building up the community. That's what it's all about.
Shoutout is an Ellering Stories production. For more episodes, visit elleringstories.com.